Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah. Happy Tuesday. How's your week going so far? How was your weekend? You survived Monday, so, must be going pretty good so far, pretty well in that regard, I would hope. Let's see, my week is going okay. I keep forgetting what day it is, like all day Saturday or all day Sunday. I thought it was Saturday. It was not. And then I've just been confused ever since. I'm not really sure why I thought Sunday was Saturday, especially since I knew that my dad's birthday was on Saturday. And so I don't really know where I got confused. Anyway, we are going to talk about a book today. I know you're surprised. I am speaking today with author Stephanie LaVigne about her cozy mystery, Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies. This is a Sunshine State mystery. It's the banner on the book says The Sunshine State, Cozy plus Crime, so that's fun. Let me read you the description on the back. As a single mom living in her quaint hometown nestled along Florida's Gulf Coast, Piper has all but abandoned her dreams of ever becoming a professional writer. So when a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity opens up at the small beach town paper where she works, she has to make a split-second decision. Go for it, even if it requires a little fib, or give up a shot at her lifelong goal. To complicate things, in waltzes a worldly crime reporter who is easy to talk to and even easier on the eyes. Add in a demanding editor, alongside a theatrical best friend, a lively family, and co-workers who run the gamut from supportive to conniving, and things start getting tricky. Scrambling for a topic that could keep readers hooked, Piper dives into the world of genealogy, something she knows absolutely nothing about. When her investigation turns up more questions than answers, her findings threaten to open up a Pandora's box that can't be closed. What do Bogey and Bacall, a goldfish, and a never-ending mountain of laundry have in common? There's only one way to find out. A story about friendship, family, and finding your passion. See if Piper can score her very first headline by sorting the truth from the lies. And again, that is the description of Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies by Stephanie LaVigne. It is a cozy mystery, but it is not a murder mystery. So this is one book that if you are looking for a mystery that doesn't start with a dead body, this is the book for you. The mystery here is figuring out this genealogy. So Piper, as it says, she gets involved in writing this article. It has to do with genealogy. And as she delves into the genealogy, the little lie, of course, being that she knows really nothing about genealogy, except that her mother knows about it, and she recruits her mom to help. My gosh, this just sounds like something I would do. My mom knows about genealogy. I do not. I'd be like, Mom, I need your help. Yeah. Moving on. So she gets her mom to help. They start looking into this genealogy, and the answers that they thought would be pretty easy are not lining up. The facts are not lining up. And so she has to figure out what is going on. Does this mean she can still publish this article, knowing that it's going to disrupt some lives, etc.? So the mystery is figuring out what's going on with this genealogy that is not adding up. Still a mystery, still a puzzle to be solved, but as I said, no murder. There is no body count in this book, which is fun sometimes, right? Sometimes you just need a lighthearted read that has great characters. Piper is a fun main character. working to balance her career, her two kids, dating, etc. And then the cast of secondary characters, her parents, her best friend, the new guy who shows up at the newspaper and is, of course, easy on the eyes, and even one guy who doesn't really have much role, but he is Piper's rival for this position that she's trying to get for the feature article. He's just so dramatic. There's a better word for him, but he's so well written. You know someone like him. You've encountered someone like him. And so love that Stephanie is able to create, even in those characters who don't have a lot of page time, just you know someone like that, or that person is going to remind you of someone that you know in your own life. At any rate, let's go ahead and let Stephanie talk more about her book. Again, it's called Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies, and let's turn now to that interview.
Hi, Stephanie. Welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And I'm excited to have you here to talk about headlines, deadlines, and lies. But before we get to the book, if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. I am a full-time author. I live in South Florida with my little family and close to my extended family. So I get to see everybody all the time, which is very nice. And I write romance and I write mystery. I've spent the last several years writing romance under pen names, always with the intention of writing mystery. And this year has been my kind of coming out crossover as I am slowly making my way into my mystery series. So it's been a fun little life here, journey.
This is a cozy, so I would imagine that makes the transition maybe a little easier from romance to mystery, because you can combine both.
Yeah, I think to some degree from a branding perspective, because I do a lot of my day and a lot of my world is in the business of writing and books. And so there's a little misstep in making it so crossovery, because I wanted to appeal to my romance writers who I love and have been with me, and then also start in this journey. So I feel like it is it's like a sweet romance, cozy mystery. And also because it doesn't have the murder aspect to it, but so it's extra cozy, not quirky, but not as quirky and slapstick as a lot of cozies. But yeah, it's nestled in there a little in both.
Yeah. So can you give a bit of an overview of the premise of the book?
Yeah, of course. So at its center, it's really a story about friendship, family, and finding your passion, which is not the mystery part perhaps, but I think that kind of comes through a lot with this book because it's a very beach read, I'd say. And then on the outside, it's a genealogical mystery where the main character, Piper, is trying to uncover information about her best friend's long-lost dad, who died as a young man in this freak Navy accident that they know very little about. And she thinks that she's trying to do an article to basically get a job, like her dream job, a shot at her dream job. So she tells a little bit of a white lie and says that she's this genealogical expert, thinking that she can just use a DNA test and a little bit of research to write this heartwarming story. But it turns out that there are some secrets that want to stay hidden, and there's basically no information. And therefore, she finds herself in her little quagmire. So colorful side characters and a cute beach town rounded out, and it is a lighthearted mystery with a little sweet romance along the way.
Yeah, and of course, there has to be a little bit of, craziness ensuing in the little white lie that becomes sort of bigger as things go on, because that's just the nature of, you have to have drama and conflict in a book or it doesn't go anywhere. I
always say antics ensue.
Yeah, that's right. because if it was just a story about her and she suggested this article and then she wrote it and then it was over, it'd be like, well, alrighty then.
She did great.
What was your initial inspiration for the story?
So I originally had wanted to write a feel-good mystery that didn't start with a murder or another horrific event. Even in cozies, there's still, we don't think of them as horrific, but, the cataclysmic event. And I don't know, sometimes we just have too much going on in the world, and I feel like we need a little breather from calamity. And it's kind of been the last couple of years a lot of that. And so I had been thinking about how to add like a genealogy story into a story for quite a while. And so I'd been sort of playing with, every time I'd hear a crazy family tree story, I'd be like, oh, that would make a fantastic mystery book or a really fun read. So I always feel like there's like secrets and mysteries and incongruities when you're looking into family tree stuff. My mom's really into genealogy, or at least she has maybe done it on our behalf. I don't know if she was really into it because she wanted to be, or if it just kind of, she became the resident expert. And so she was always doing the last decade or something, a lot of research. And my paternal grandma, I know a long time ago, she had done it. And I find it really interesting. I just haven't had time in my life to listen to all these amazing stories or to download all of the great research they've done. And so when I was trying to write like a Hallmark Channel mystery book, inspired book, I came back to the family tree genealogy idea and started with that.
Time for that first break of the podcast, now that you know a little bit more about headlines, deadlines, and lies. When we come back, we will be talking more about genealogy, more about our moms knowing stuff about genealogy, stuff like that. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with Stephanie LaVigne. We are talking about her cozy Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies. Let's return to that interview.
Yeah, my mom also has been very into ancestry for the last probably 10 or so years, so I completely understand. And again, I find it really interesting, but also don't seem to have the time or possibly the patience to do it myself.
I know. Yeah. There's a lot, and it was funny because once I started writing this book, then all these weird sort of, I don't know if there were synchronicities or not, but like things started happening that would be genealogy, like mystery related. And, I got a random text for someone looking that I didn't know, from someone looking for their long lost friend. And all these details were in some of my books. It was very weird. And then I'd start looking, someone would call my mom about trying to help them with her family tree. And I'd sit down and almost start thinking like my main character. I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense. And look, this person could not have been married to this person and had this kid. And I'm like, oh, it takes a lot of time, but you can definitely get into it. So it's definitely, it has to be a choice because it could take over, I think.
Right. Yeah. Talk a little bit more about Piper, the main character, and what about her you think will resonate with readers.
I think for me, she embodies a lot of women and likely men who struggle to balance being a parent with their own ambitions. I think that was kind of her motivation for me, even though that's just part of the story. But I feel like day-to-day life can get super overwhelming all the time, or a lot, especially these days. And especially if you add in kids, or you're working and you try and have any version of a life and do all the things that just you have to do every day. And so it's finding the ways that we navigate it, whether that's through our really good friendships, or maybe sometimes binge watching over laundry and popcorn, or having a new romance, or taking leaps of faith that makes us human and is something that we can share with one another. So in this story, you know, hopefully people are watching her sort of stumble and try and attempt to, you know, quote unquote, follow her dreams, but also maintain the everyday life that can be a lot, and her little kids in her house, and she's single mom, and she has her parents and all those things. And so my hope is that the more time we see a character like her overcoming hurdles, and the more confidence we have to take chances and risks in our own lives to live better, more fulfilling, happier lives. So hopefully people relate to that. I do when I see it in other characters and when I was writing it.
It's funny that you mentioned the laundry and the popcorn, because I was just thinking about that conversation before you, or about that scene in the book before you talked about it. And you know, she comes home from work, she puts her hair up in a messy bun, puts on comfy clothes, and she just wants to binge watch something, but the couch is covered in laundry. And I was super impressed that she folded the laundry instead of just sitting on it.
Yeah. Is it 50-50 for me, whether which of those will happen?
Right. Or just maybe I wouldn't sit on it, but I would shove it over.
Yeah. Yes. We are a wrinkle clothes house probably over here, because although I don't binge watch TV nearly as much as I wish I did, but my mind, you know, still wants to do that, and therefore it's like, no folding.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. What types of research did you do for the book?
Well, I finally did listen to a lot of the genealogy research that my mom had done, so that was helpful. That I had a little Cliff notes there. I could ask her and, you know, say, hey, give me a tour of this thing. I signed up for a proper, you know, professional Ancestry.com account, among other things like that, and became familiar with the inner workings of those sites, because that's sort of how Piper thinks she's going to easily just launch into, you know, wham, bam, oh, look, here's the information, here's your dad, which doesn't happen, but I wanted to, but she does use it a lot, you know, in the book, because I think anyone who does genealogy currently uses those sites. And then also, like my mom or my grandma also has all the experience with the microfiche and tiny little offices in small towns, but I could not go to tiny offices in small towns. So I learned online, and then I researched as needed, everything from naming military ships to the DNA centimorgans, and just sort of as I'd come to a place in the book that I needed to research, I'd go figure it out. I love research though, so that's great for me. Any rabbit hole I can fall down, I'm like, oh, how can I be a quasi-expert in this?
That's a good thing. Yeah, I mean, I knew DNA testing is so prevalent now. You're always hearing people who are doing it through 23andMe or Ancestry.com or what have you. Yeah. But I never really thought about the more complicated science behind it. And so when Piper gets into that in the book, I was like, oh my gosh, that's more complicated than I had in my head, which of course it would be. But
yeah,
you and
me both.
Yeah, I sympathize with Piper when she was like, I'll just, you know, pop this information in there and it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. So, yeah.
And it was actually, I'm so sorry. But I was just going to
go ahead.
Say, no, and that's sort of to some degree what happened to me too, because I guess this, you know, was more true to life or closer to life than some of my other books. But, you know, I start going down this path and my mom's like, no. You have to understand all of this. And I'm like, oh, do I? Oh, I guess I do. And then I'm like, there's math and science and calculations and estimated guesses involved. So, you know, it kind of worked. Hopefully it doesn't for anyone who doesn't like numbers, it's not that complicated as you've read, but, it was a bit of a wake-up call as, oh, you're not just going to tell me that I'm, 3/4 French and, a third lovely, and that's all I need to know. This is why I have the color eyes.
And I'm not just going to look at some censuses and move on from there.
Yeah. Give me my family. Just tell me it all.
Right. When it comes to your characters, how much character development do you like to do before you start writing, and how much of it evolves as you write?
I try to do as much as I can before writing, but that being said, I also find that I don't necessarily know who the character is going to be until I start writing. So this sometimes means going back and forth between planning, plotting, writing, and then reevaluating and adjusting the plan to sort of fit the version of the character who ended up emerging. And so start with a rough idea of the elements that I want to include. But it isn't really until I start writing that I'm able to fully see how those elements come together, if that makes sense. So I ended up I really, really, really just want to be hyper organized and know everything before I get started, especially because I don't always have a lot of time in my life. So I'm like, the more organized they can be, the better I can write. But I find that I can only develop the character so far until I start writing, and then they take on a voice and a personality and start interacting. And I mean, I guess creativity is probably sparking as I'm writing. So, but then sometimes I have to be like, oh, okay, hold on, let me go back and readjust this, because, for example, on one of my stories, there's a side character that has now become the main love interest. It was a guy, and it was supposed to be his best friend was supposed to be the main love interest. And I'm like, but wait, why are you still here? Like, why did you become the main guy? And so now I have to adjust. And I'm like, I guess the story is just a little bit different than I thought it was going to be, because I didn't know that their rapport was going to take on the characteristics that it did so quickly. So
I don't think I've spoken to many, if any, authors who haven't had characters surprise them in some way. So they seem to kind of take on a life of their own.
Yeah, it's weird. No matter how much you're like, I am in control of this, but I think that there's just maybe like the trickster part of your brain that's like lying in wait, and it's like, wait, it's my turn. I'm gonna throw something at you. What if this happened? Why weren't you here during the planning phase?
Exactly. I'm trying to be organized, and I have a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Didn't you read the spreadsheet?
It's time for our second break of the podcast, but I remember thinking during this interview while talking to Stephanie about how, yes, characters tend to surprise authors, but also authors tend to do crazy or terrible things to their characters, because if everything was perfect, it wouldn't be that terribly of an interest. It wouldn't be that interesting of a read, right? And so then I just jotted down. Let me look at my notes that I jotted down during the interview. What if we are just characters that some author is messing with for dramatic purposes? I mean, there's all those theories about how we're just, like at the end of the first Men in Black movie, where we're just the Earth is just a marble in some giant alien's marble bag, all those kinds of things. What if we are just all characters in some author's novel, and we are constantly doing things that surprise the author, and in return the author is constantly messing with our lives so that it's more of an interesting read. Yeah, these are the things that I think about. Let's take a break. When we come back, more with Stephanie. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review podcast and my interview with Stephanie LaVigne. We are talking today about her book, Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies.
Obviously, you talked to your mom about genealogy and this type of research, but are there other autobiographical elements in this book or in your writing in general?
For a long time, I didn't think there were a lot of autobiographical elements in my stories. I know that I would use, I don't know how to say, like, empathetic. Like, I'm pretty good at putting myself in people's shoes and kind of viewing life through people's lenses, and so, which is helpful when you're writing. So I can kind of say, okay, well, this person wouldn't react like me, but let me see what their way of looking at the world is. And so for writing, that's always been helpful. But lately, I'm not only finding that I'm including a lot more personal elements. I also think all along maybe I've been pulling from autobiographical things that have happened in my life. But then, I don't know, lately I'm really seeing that I'm including a lot more, fictionalized autobiographical elements in my stories, which just feels fun, I think, is why I'm doing it. But I think it's also that I've lived long enough to have a lot to pull from. So maybe it's just I'm getting old, and I'm like, why make up something new when you've lived so many things?
There you go. On your website, there are 2 other books that look like they're in this same series. Do you have, first of all, is that correct? I guess to preempt, I don't know what the second part of the question was, but lately I've actually been doing a little bit of an audit and a reset. This has just been a kind of a weird year for not only me, but a lot of people I know and other authors. And so I did have 2 mostly written books that I was planning to, they're all standalones that were going to go together in this series. So they're standalone female amateur detective kind of cozy Florida books, but I may be pushing those 2 because I have a bunch of other books series that I've been working on and I can tell you about, but that have seemed to push to the forefront after this little audit and reset that I've been going through, that seemed like the right thing to do. Okay, and I was just going to ask if you had kind of an arc for that series, but we don't need to worry about that.
I may have to do a little website change.
Yes. So, can you talk a little bit about then what you're working on right now?
Yeah. So I'm kind of been going back and looking at all the series, because I usually have several series ideas that I kind of keep. Some of them I'm working on actively, and sometimes I'm just sort of letting them percolate, and then they'll find their day to come forth and come to the surface. But I have about 4 mystery series that I'm super excited about right now, which sounds like a lot, but one of them is serialized, and the other 3 I'm sorting through them. This week I'm sending them out actually to a bunch of my beta readers, and I'm going to have them help me figure out which series they need right away, which one they need first, and second and third. And so basically I'm going to know probably within the next week or two. One of them set on a chartered mega yacht, and it's about the detectives that the high seas never knew they needed. I guess the high seas are they. One's a bit more of a police procedural and inspired by Florida man crimes, if you know what those are. We have a very special, a special genre of criminal in Florida that are, and so that's something. I've become very Florida centric since moving back. I've been back for a while, but all my stories are really in Florida because that's become my happy place. And then the third one, which is the one that I have been doing the most on, is I'm going to call it traditional female PI, though Florida style, in that sort of an upbeat, not hard-boiled, but like an upbeat, quirky way about a newbie female private investigator whose husband is presumed dead after a spearfishing trip to the Keys, and she needs to figure out how to keep moving quickly because there are some suspicious inconsistencies with her bank accounts and the life insurance, and she gets thrown together with a jaded, disillusioned, but charming drunk of an ex-elite detective who just wants to hang out in his hammock with his droopy bloodhound sidekick and do no work. And basically it's fun and beachy, mystery, sarcasm, and a manatee. So one of those is going to be released sooner than later, but I'm working on all three of those. And also I have my romance. And so I just turned my series from a sweet small town romance, a brand new series, into a rom-com. And I have been working on that series Bible all weekend in book one. And it is also very fun and just I wasn't necessarily expecting to go full rom-com, and then here we are.
Sure. Well, you had me at manatee, so I'm ready. I'm ready for that one. And also, I don't necessarily need to be an alcoholic, but the just hanging out in your hammock sounds fabulous.
I know. I'm hoping he gets some. I hope he, gets reformed along the way. But don't worry, there's also another guy in there that he has his act together. But yes, I know. I also want to hang out with my hammock and ocean breeze all day.
Yeah, that sounds great. Are there any of your other writings or books that you would like to highlight?
I think I probably just gave too many to you. So, those. Check back with me next time we talk in a few months.
Sounds good. Perfect. Well, in terms
I have other.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I have a new one of my small town romances just came out in box set, and so that's doing its own thing called Serenity Falls, and working on the follow up to that, which is being released. But I'm very excited about the ones I just talked about.
Cool. All right. Thank you. In terms of writing, is it something that you've always wanted to do, or did you start that later in life? How did you come to be a published writer?
Probably like most writers, I feel like the conversation always goes that I think I always knew I wanted to write in some capacity, or I always knew that I would, because I was always writing or coming up with magazine ideas or writing for the Lit Mag or writing scripts that thankfully have never seen the light of day beyond a notebook. But I was in theater for a very long time, so that was my first love. And I think I spent too long thinking that I was basically going to be like an actress / playwright. Then I was introduced to the idea of film at the tail end of college, which would have been something I wish I had focused on much earlier. But then I was basically thrust out into the real world and entered the film business, running at full speed with very little knowledge of the actual industry at all. And so next thing I knew, I was in New York, and I wrote a lot, and I had wanted to write. I had taken a writing for SNL. I wanted to write for SNL, and day one of the class, woman's like, women never write for SNL, and if you did not go to Harvard, that is not a job you will ever get, which was disheartening. Wow. So I was like, geez, thank you, with my very little time that I'm here investing. So I basically had a film career, and I was trying to write, but I didn't really know what that meant because I only knew that you could write for, film or television, and I was working in the industry on the production side. And so I don't know, it is very clear in retrospect that I should have been focusing on the writing, not all these other things, but I also had to survive and pay bills. And also I loved working in the film industry. I had at one point done I had taken, it was really just the holidays. I want to say a sabbatical, but I had just came home for the holidays and really did a lot of soul searching at some point. And at the end of that, I knew I need to write a book, like novels. I need to write fiction. And I then promptly decided to become a photographer. So I edged out of the film industry and into the photography and design industry. And I did that for several years. And then finally I put my foot down and said, this is ridiculous. You need to be a writer. And so I did. And so I've been doing that now, and it's been great. And I wish I had done it earlier, though I guess I would not have all the madcap life stories that I had if perhaps I had lived a more linear life and path. But I was writing all along, did every single thing but focus on being a writer while writing and stashing it away in drawers, and finally got old enough that I said, okay, stop this. You're going to have to start from the bottom, so start.
Yeah, but think of all the experience and the experiences, both experience and experiences that you've had that you can implement in your writing.
Yes, I have. If nothing else, I have had a lot of interesting experiences, and luckily I'm someone who really enjoys experiencing new things and adventures. So I can't regret it. I wish that I could sometimes control who I am and be a more linear, less tangential person, but we are who we are. So
That's right.
Time for the final break of the podcast. When we return, Stephanie will be sharing her advice for aspiring authors. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered. Download the GSMC Travel Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and the conclusion of my interview with author Stephanie LaVigne.
Do you have advice for aspiring authors from your own experience?
I always have a lot of advice for aspiring authors. I'm very passionate about encouraging and motivating and inspiring people and giving them good advice, but a succinct way would be research books, research what the type of books you want to write or that you think you want to write. Go into those authors, those genres, like mystery. That's huge. There's so much within mystery. Sci-fi, fantasy, all of them. There's so much to learn and research and to see what reader expectation is, which matters. And even if you want to do memoir or whatever, just still research, then write more. And you need a lot of books to be a professional full-time writer or even part-time writer. To make a living, any version of a living, people need to have a product to buy, and you have to create that product. And especially in this day and age where we somehow can consume so much content and information, if someone likes you, they want more of what you have. And if you don't have it to give that to them, they have to go somewhere else, not because you're not like the best thing ever, but because they need to, fill their well of whatever it is that you could provide. So research, then write, then treat your writing like a business. So know that you have all the power to create a career as an author. It is not always for the faint of heart, but there are so many wonderful people out there who will help you and support you along the way. So many amazing resources, so many amazing authors and publishers, just so many things. And when I say publishers, I especially mean, the indie publishing community. You don't need to wait for that elusive publishing contract anymore. And I think that's something that a lot of us hold dear, like, oh my gosh, that's the thing. But it's not. The world has just simply changed, and the tools and the information are available to figure out how to make it happen. So if you are an aspiring author, just realize like you are in control. You can create a career. It is amazing. I just came back from a conference of kind of big name. You have to make a certain amount of money to be in this organization. So as an author, and it is amazing. Like, you would never know. All these people make a living as an author, and many of them, or I'd even say maybe even most of them, are hybrid or self-indie published now. Like, the tools and information are available to figure out how to make it happen. So take all that into consideration, then go back to the first 3 steps: research, write, and treat your writing like a business. That's my soapbox for today.
The industry has definitely changed, and I mean, even beyond self-publishing or indie publishing, there's just the fact that you can submit so much easier. You don't have to mail off giant manuscripts, at your own expense. So it really has changed in our lifetime.
Yeah, it was a hurdle for me for years. I mean, I never sent stuff off because I thought, wait, I just have to write things on spec and query, and that is a perfectly great and reasonable thing to do, and it's definitely something people should do. But if it's an impediment to getting it to moving forward, it doesn't have to be a thing anymore. Like, it's insane what you can do now compared to even not that long ago. I won't age myself.
It's okay, I understand. When you take the time to read for yourself, what are your favorite genres and who are your go-to authors?
I love books. Like, I always have. I don't have favorites, especially with fiction, but I read and or listen to a ridiculous amount of nonfiction reference books. So personal and business development, books about any subject that I'm interested in. So for some reason, I'm constantly consuming that kind of thing. Like, oh, that's interesting about homeschool or cults or nutrition, or a lot of business development, things like that. So I do that a lot. And for fiction, like I said, I don't have favorite authors, but I've always enjoyed, I really like quirky, clever, witty, or well-written mystery books. I think especially that would be sort of my favorite go-to. I love Carl Hiaasen and Edna Buchanan. I don't know, just like popping into my head. I mean, there's so many, but like J.A. Jance creates like a real comfort food for me. When I was a photographer, I would just listen to her series while I edited for hours and hours and hours. And I like that sort of, I like female PIs and mystery, Harlan Coben. I go all around. I always come back to Carl Hiaasen and Edna Buchanan sort of being like 2 of my first ones that I was like, yes, one day I'd like to write like that. But I also just because I like them.
Well, asking about a favorite author is almost worse than asking about your favorite child, because most people have a finite number of children, whereas authors.
True. I know. And at any time, you just start reading and you're like, I just started reading Jana de Leon the other day, and the whole time I'm just in my head, I'm like, this is hilarious. This is so clever. This is wonderful. And I'm only on book 1. I'm like, oh, she's been around. I know of her, but there's so many good writers. And so many fun stories.
Yes. And I do a lot of interviews with debut authors on this podcast, so I just keep finding more and more and more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't envy you because I do not have enough time. I do and do not.
No, never enough time. I mentioned a while ago your website, so if you can tell people how to find your website as well as any social media they might be able to interact with you on.
Yeah, my website is StephanieLaVigne.com, which I wish was spelled easier, but hopefully maybe it'll be, and if you're listening to this podcast, written there for you. It's the complicated French way. You can sign up for my newsletter, which is always the best way to stay in touch. If you wanted to find my books, go to my Amazon page and follow me there. And they are pretty good, I think, about notifying people if a new release is out. And if you're active on BookBub or Goodreads, that is another great place to follow me if that's your happy place. And of course, for social stuff, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. That is the hierarchy.
All right. Thank
finding
you.
Me.
Yeah. Both of which were down yesterday for many hours. So
it was crazy. Hence the newsletter. It's good thing we all have newsletters.
Oh yeah, exactly. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you had hoped to be able to highlight during our time together?
No, this has been great. I think I have told you probably more than you even needed to know about me and the inner workings of life over here. I just hope that people find. Oh, you're nice. Yeah. I just want people to be brave and happy and be willing to read good books and take leaps of faith in your own life that can let you feel like you're living a life as fun or interesting or fulfilling as the characters you read about. Hopefully not as crisis and antic induced, but fun and wonderful and fulfilling in the end with a wonderful happily ever after all the time.
Yes. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today and to not only talk about Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies, but some of your other works. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been amazing time spent with you.
Thank you once again to Stephanie for joining me to talk about Headlines, Deadlines, and Lies, as well as genealogy and all the other fun topics we covered. I love talking to authors, as you know, and I really love when I talk to authors, and there's just a lot of laughter and a lot of fun, and this was one of those interviews. So thank you, Stephanie, for that. I really, really appreciate it. If you are a fan of cozy mysteries, especially this time of year, I love to read cozy mysteries during October. This one isn't, ghost related or murder related, but still, if you like mysteries, I tend to like to read them in the fall, especially. I guess that's just my time to read mysteries, but you should definitely check this one out. It would be a great beach read also if you're somewhere that's warm enough to still be hanging out on the beach, like Florida or some places in California as well. It snowed in Montana today. I forgot to mention that at the beginning. Yeah, maybe yesterday too as well. A friend of mine who lives in Idaho they got 6 inches today, and we always tend to get a first snowstorm right around this point. I was looking at my Facebook memories today, and yeah, right around this October 12th, October 15th, snow. But that's not what I was talking about. I was talking about reading this. And hey, even if you're grumpy because it's snowy, read a book about Florida where the weather is sunny and the characters are fun. Definitely something to check out. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. I hope you will join me next time. I'm going to be doing my Halloween episode, talking about some of the books that I like to read this time of year. I kind of gave it away with the cozy thing, but you probably remember that from last year, as well as an anthology that has one of the authors who's been on the podcast a couple of times featured in it, so tune in for that. I'm pretty excited about talking about Halloween and the books that I like to read this time of year. If you are a fan of, Halloween, tune in for that. But if you are a fan of this podcast, please do follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Actually posting episodes on TikTok now, or videos on TikTok now, so yikes. Also, if you're a fan of this podcast, please, as always, if you have not done this already, take a few moments to leave a review, whether written or starred. Again, really helps us out, helps to get this podcast out to more book lovers like yourselves, and I would greatly appreciate it. Hope you're having a great week. Hope you'll join me again on Friday for the Halloween episode, and I hope that your week, as always, affords you plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.